Just some thoughts about Easter and the very season that we're celebrating and the pandemic that has gone along with it. I know that most of the thoughts are about the number of people that have contracted the disease, the number of people that have died. But I, as a priest, think of many other people that those aren't what is happening to them, or that isn't what is happening to them. They're suffering loss of jobs. They're also, in many ways, suffering depression. And as a result of that, you have suicide that goes along with it, and you do have depression that goes along with it. So as I think of those things, I would just like to take us back to Easter and to the idea of the joy that goes with Easter. And sometimes I think we find that in just the little things in life. I know we could dwell upon the fact, for instance, in my life, on April 13th at 11 o'clock in the morning, I was supposed to get on a plane and go to Santiago and do the El Camino, which is a pilgrimage walk of 114 kilometers. As we know, I'm sitting here today because my flight was canceled. The person who was going to guide me is in lockdown. But then I think of this. I think of how a year ago I could hardly walk because I was in so much pain with my back, and also the fact that I had had a heart attack. But look at the bright side. I recovered from that. I did the New York Marathon with my hand cycle, and I walked 10 miles in preparation for the El Camino. So there's that side of life too, and I'll reschedule that trip for next year. So in the midst of everything that's going on, there is hope. Another thing that I think about is that I have different medals that I wear for whatever I'm doing. So if I want to be inspired and do some writing or write a sermon, then I put on my Holy Spirit medal and I ask that Holy Spirit to be with me. If I'm doing my masses on a Sunday morning, I put on my Pope Francis medal and think about how I want to be the best priest that I can be for my people. I have for a long time wanted to write a novel about Dismas the Good Thief. And I've usually used Lent as a time to get serious about that. Well, for I would guess 10 years, I have never been able to get beyond the 6th chapter. And then all of a sudden, as I was hand cycling the other day and thinking and reflecting and wearing my Holy Spirit medal, the thought just came to mind of how that book should be written. So I had a new beginning, a new ending, and all of the steps that go in between it. And it was quite inspiring. So in the midst of that writer's block for years and years and years, there was reason to hope, because now hopefully I can bring that novel to completion. When I think of our celebration of Easter at St. John's and at St. James, yes, it was really different, not being able to celebrate Mass, not being with people. But we did have, the doors open at certain times, and a limited number of people, you had to stay under 10, could come in and worship. And I was really impressed with the spirit and the faith of those who came and those who worshiped on their own. In the middle of that, on Easter Sunday, one of the things that I did was drive down to Endeavor, where I'm restoring that shrine to Our Lady of Guadalupe. And we have the cross from that here as part of that and as a reminder, of that shrine. As well as our periods of devotion at St. James and St. John's, which were very impressive. I took the time to travel down to that shrine and endeavor to Our Lady of Guadalupe, which I am restoring. And what took me down there was the night before, Joanne Van Wee had called. Her husband had died, and he took a great interest in that shrine. And she called and said, "We would like to go to the shrine and celebrate Easter there in memory of him." And so I said, fine. I told her where the key was. And then I traveled down, and they were already there. And what they had done was they had lawn chairs set up around the altar because the pews aren't in place. And they had masks on. And they were watching the video of the Mass from Wisconsin Dells. They had set a computer up on the altar and were there in honor of the late John Van Wee, celebrating Mass together. And I thought, how interesting. But there were two things that really struck me. One was that God had returned to his house. God had returned to this church after being absent for so many years, and the church being closed for so many years. The second thing was just the deep faith that the Van Wee family had and exhibited as they were watching that video of that Mass. It was something totally impressive. But again, in the midst of all that's going on, there's reason to hope. There's reason for joy in seeing things like that. After that, in the afternoon, I traveled over to Chula Vista. The day before I had called, they were doing a takeout brunch. And I called and asked if I could reserve a brunch and come over and get it. So I drove over, and they gave me this huge box. And I thought, there's more food in there than one single person is ever going to eat. I could just tell by not even opening the box. So I stopped at Pat and Marietta Bentley's house on the way home. And Marietta runs Martha's BRF in Princeton. And I thought, okay, maybe some of this food can go to them. We opened the box, huge amount of food, whole turkey and dressing and sweet potatoes and mashed potatoes, cranberries. It was just in a whole 7-layer salad tray of it. So I said, Marietta, why don't you take this and take it over to Martha's and share it with the people that are residents there, and they then can have a second Easter dinner that's going to be a great Easter dinner. But at the same time, I was thinking to myself, it's sort of like the multiplication of loaves. I asked for a single meal. And what it turned out to be was a meal that could serve a good number of people. When we look at our times, it's easy to become depressed. And it's easy to say to ourselves, everything is lost. But think of the small things that happen in your life that really should instill hope and should instill joy. After all, if this priest, who in one click of a rifle scope is going to hit 80, can have joy and hope at Easter, you can too.